Good morning, crime community. I'm here to read out the first chapter of Patriotism Unhinged by James Manning. Chapter 1. Lee Harvey Oswald received the Marines designation UNQ and failed to qualify as rifleman. Oswald was not the JFK shooter. This is James Manning's story. I enlisted in the Marine Corps in 61, the year before they put Steve in the program. I was serving in the 1st Marine Battalion, 2nd Marine Division on November 22nd, 1963, when President Kennedy was assassinated. I was in shock and heartsick like the rest of the world and glued to any TV or radio for far more information. I accepted the Warren Report when it came out and, like most people, moved on. In 1964, my tour in a rifle company was over, and I accepted a transfer to headquarters Marine Corps in Arlington, Virginia. I worked in the Naval Annex on Columbia Pike as a clerk in the records section and was billeted to the Henderson Hall adjacent to the Arlington Cemetery. During the day, I worked with civilians, but when we drew night duty, we were alone from 5 p.m. until 7 a.m. We were there for security, but we doubled as file clerks and answered the phone if the staff duty officer needed emergency data from the record books if a Marine was injured anywhere in the world. We had a cot and a TV, but in 1964, there was only 3 channels, and I could get pretty dull at times. One of the things we used to do to break the monotony was go down to the special officers section. It was a small file room inside the football-size documents building. There they kept the jackets of the illustrious Marines heroes, Chesty Puller, Dan Daly, Congressional Medal Honors winners. Now, most of these files were 1 to 2 inches thick. I would finger through the files, pick out one, and read the exploits of that particular hero. One night, I was working through the files cabinets, and I saw what appeared to be an empty folder. I pulled it out, intending to discard it, and I was amazed to see it was labeled Oswald, Lee Harvey. I opened it, and inside were only 4 or 5 pages, yet a copy of his DD-214 was on the top. Every person serving in the armed forces is issued the document when separated from active duty. The document provides various veteran benefits. As I studied the information, my attention was drawn to Section 26. This is where decorations, medals, commendations, badges, and awards are listed, as well as rifle qualifications. The Marine Corps has 3 levels of qualifications: expert, sharpshooter, and marksman. Oswald received the designation UNQ, the acronym for Marines who failed to qualify as riflemen. Had he ever qualified while on active duty, the highest level would be the one shown. I was fully aware of what I was looking at. Lee Harvey Oswald could have never made 3 shots in Dallas, let alone 1. It was common knowledge that if you didn't qualify as a rifleman, you would go to a motor pool, become a cook, or be assigned to an air wing, like the one in Atsugi, Japan, where Oswald was once assigned. The next event occurred when Jim Garrison announced that he was going to indict Clay Shaw as part of a conspiracy to assassinate President Kennedy. Besides my family and few close friends, I never shared what I had seen in that file. I decided that this was time to reveal what I believed was a small yet important detail in that case. In April of '68, I reached Jim Garrison's office in New Orleans, and after going through several assistants, I told them that I had some information that might be important to this case. Garrison picked up the phone. First, I was impressed with his refined manner and easy way of asking me questions. I offered what I was part of a study group of the assassination at Old Dominion, and we'd love to have him speak there any time. He said he would love to come, and when the trial was over, I started to say that I had something that I wasn't supposed to see, but he abruptly stopped me from saying anything else. He said something to the effect that the phone line might not be secure. He instructed me to call back in 2 weeks, and we broke off the call. A few days later, an article appeared in the local paper the Virginian pilot, with a picture of Garrison and a story about his conversation with me, and agreed to speak at Old Dominion. I was shocked to see it and could only assume someone from his office called the paper. At the time, I had a job at the jewelry store in Norfolk, Virginia. The part-time watchman there was very strange. He never spoke to anyone but the manager. I asked the manager why he had a .357 Magnum under a towel on his bench. The manager said that he was some government spook and worked for the army down south, yet he is excellent at fixing watches and locks. Several days after the article appeared in the paper, I arrived at work and the spook called me over with 2 fingers. I looked around to see if he was motioning to someone else. He wasn't. It was me he wanted. I walked over to him. He slid off his stool, got nose to nose with me, and said, "If you want what's good for you, you leave the fucking Kennedy thing alone. Excuse my French. This is supposed to be a children's program. Maybe you should take the children out of the room. Do you understand me? I'll be the honest. I'll be a hell of an impression on me." And I said nothing and tried not to let him know I was concerned. Yet I decided to try to find out something about him. He was born in Norfolk, Virginia, and his family owned the Sansoni vegetable stand for years, only a few blocks from the jewelry store. His name was Antonio or Vincent Sansoni. At this part, I have to stop and say that my friend Vinnie Sansoni and his dad, Albert, as far as I know, are in no relation to the Vinnie Sansoni in this book that intimidated James Manning. They're not the same family as I know, but if they were, it would not surprise me. I later learned that Sansoni worked for the NARF, the Naval Air Force Rework Facility. He became friends with Frank Fiorini. This is where it gets real interesting. He also worked there. They enjoyed flying and worked together in bars in Norfolk. For 18 months, Fiorini managed the Havana Madrid tavern that catered to foreigners, primarily Cuban merchant seamen. I learned later that Frank Fiorini changed his name to guess what? Frank Sturgis. And his mother remarried. It is well documented today that Sturgis was a longtime CIA operative and eventually became Fidel Castro's right-hand man during the successful Cuban Revolution. Sturgis also trained fighters and led the Bay of Pigs invasion against the Castro regime. Many researchers believe Sturgis was in Dallas on the day of the assassination, although there are varying accounts that insist Sturgis bragged about killing JFK. He also declined to have anything to do with the Dallas plot. Sturgis promoted widespread misinformation, claiming Fidel Castro was the mastermind behind the JFK assassination. Sturgis did time for participating in the break-in at the Watergate, which led to the scandal that eventually ended the presidency of Richard Nixon. Considering that Sansoni was close friends with Sturgis, since they met in Norfolk, where they lived most of my life, it added up to why Sansoni kept his gun on him at all times in the jewelry store where I worked. After the jewelry store manager told me Sansoni did some work for the Army down south, it would follow that perhaps Sansoni worked with Sturgis as a contract agent for the CIA, and the watchmaker job was a cover. Reprinted in Coup d'Etat in American Volume 6 by A.J. Weberman, FBI documented February 5th, 64, concerning Orlando Bosch, read, synopsis, Frank Fiorini, admitted associate of William Johnson, denied implication in or any specific knowledge of attempting MIRR. Air raid, December 28, 63, Dr. Orlando Bosch gave statement to press claiming that the bombs would have been dropped on crowds in Havana celebrating the 5th anniversary of the revolution on January 2nd, 64, had not been seized carrying bombs in secret base in the Caribbean. MMT-1 was advised that Bosch gave that distorted statement to the press for propaganda purposes, as MIRR intended only to bomb Cuba. MMTI was advised that Bosch was presently attempting to raise money to carry out further bombing raids against Cuba. The FBI interviewed Frank Fiorini as a personal friend of William Johnson. About 2 weeks ago, Fiorini was with Johnson at Broward International Airport. Johnson introduced Fiorini to Charles Bush, who operates an airline chapter business in that airport. This was the first and last contact Fiorini had with Bush. After this introduction, Johnson went with Bush to the latter's office at the airport, and Fiorini went to the nearby restaurant where he changed upon Antonio Sansoni, a Cuban exile pilot. The Tonys I knew were Italian, but if they were Cuban, it wouldn't surprise me. Fiorini said that he did not know the nature of the Johnson's business with Bush. He denied specific knowledge of Johnson being involved in an air raid attempt to cooperation with Orlando Bosch. He states, however, that he knew Johnson was up to something, but he did not know what. As I put it all together and realized Sturgis and Sansoni lived so close to my proximity, it's hard to put into words how I felt when I realized my life was threatened that day. I had never publicly spoken about it, and I knew about Oswald until I wrote this book. I called Jim Garrison's office on January 68 to conceal my crucial evidence that Oswald was innocent and not the JFK shooter. The spook at the jewelry store, Sansoni, had no idea of the true nature of my call to Garrison, yet based on my invitation to Garrison to speak at Old Dominion University, located in the heart of Norfolk, where Sansoni and his close friends Frank Sturgis lived and owned businesses, I never called Jim Garrison back when the trial was over. Many people who knew anything about the JFK assassination were killed to conceal the truth. Through my ancestry research, I learned that Sansoni came from a long line of watchmakers. I moved to Schenectady, New York, until his death in 1987. For all the people curious about the assassination and the conspiracy to conceal the facts, I believe this small yet significant detail will illuminate the truth on many levels. The Warren Report implicating Oswald is a work of fiction. I am 81 years old. 2024, as a Marine Semper Fidelis, always faithful to my honor to exonerate Lee Harvey Oswald of the JFK murder. Here's a picture of President Kennedy wanted for treason by the FBI or the CIA without Congress permission. We'll get into those reasons later. That's in chapter 2. Wanted for treason is the title. Enough of that book. We're going to read about a page out of this book. That's James Files, who did the headshot on the president. He's come out and admitted it. To see if we can read a little page out of Mr. Files' book. In 1967, the mere existence of the Pontchartrain base was still secret history. We're both going to refer to Garrison in both these books. In 1967, the mere existence of the Pontchartrain base was still secret history. It was the camp that wasn't there until Haynes Johnson wrote of Garrison's notions about the existence of a training camp for the Cubans in St. Tammany Parish across Lake Pontchartrain in the summer of '63, where supposedly Oswald went for the purpose of participating in the plot to kill Castro. The CIA denied in '67 even having knowledge of the camp at Lacombe. Old Hands at Station confirmed Jimwave, Miami, was the only agency-sponsored training camp. To the best of Station's knowledge, it was no station or agency supporting or funding the Christian Democratic Movement training camp. By the time the truth finally did start to dribble out, the coup plotters had such a firm grip on the media that it made barely a ripple. New Orleans resident George Whitlock told historian Michael Kurtz he had observed Ferry, Oswald, and numerous Cubans all dressed in military fatigues and carrying automatic rifles, conducting what appeared to be a military training maneuver near Badico Creek, a swampy inland body of water, a bayan near Lacombe, on the north shore of Lake Pontchartrain. In early September '63, 2 months after the government raid on anti-Castro guerrilla camps in the United States. In 1979, investigators for the House Select Committee on Assassination discovered a training film from the archives of Georgetown University. Ferry, Oswald, Bannister, and David Atlee Phillips were all on an 8mm home movie shot in the summer of '63. Also pictured on the film was Operation 40 recruiter George H.W. Bush. James Files. Grab yourself some popcorn. We're going to see a movie. It's a shadowy landscape, almost a moonscape, at dusk, and the film is grainy. An 8mm film taken during the September '63. Trees and bushes are dark, looming shapes in some semi-tropical climate, with palmettos and Spanish moss and hanging vines. Coming down on an open road, we see a limo of a 2-ton military trucks. When they stop, a group of soldiers leap out and fan across the road, wearing fatigues and carrying rifles, machine guns, and mortar components. The scene changes. We see flashes from the rifle muzzles as soldiers practicing laying down fire while their comrades rush across the field. A mortar team lobs rounds off into the distance, covering their ears with their hands. An open Jeep roars past. Its headlines pick up a road sign with the shape of the state of Louisiana and a number. Cut to 5 men in huddled conversation in the dusk around the Jeep. They included Antonio Veciana of CIA-backed Alpha 66 and Gary Bannister, whose 544 Camp Street office is stamped on Lee Harvey Oswald's Fair Play for Cuba Committee literature. Even through Bannister is CIA and Oswald is supposed to be a commie sympathizer. When we see a tall figure wearing civilian clothes, dark hair, a prominent nose, and deeply impressed wrinkles under his eyes, turning away from the camera to avoid being photographed, it's the infamous Maurice Bishop, CIA officer David Atlee Phillips from the Mexico City station, who Veciana will later finger to congressional investigators as being with Oswald in Dallas, just a month before the Kennedy assassination. The camera goes slow-mo to move to another group loitering at a nearby truck. On one of the men as the group turns to the camera and starts to smile or smirk, really the famous smirk of Lee Harvey Oswald, caught on 8mm film, training with the CIA's renegade anti-Castro Cubans. Cut to the day scene, men shooting guns, positioning their weapons, and their several more losing shots of Oswald wearing a black t-shirt and a ball cap, and close-ups of a round-faced man with a fright wig and impossibly thick, phony eyebrows. It's David Ferry. Breathed House investigator Robert Tannenbaum, today the mayor of Beverly Hills, California, where he first saw the film. Nobody ever looks like Ferry. Somebody took a film to the infamous parliamentary camp in Lecombe, the camp which housed the killers of John F. Fitzgerald Kennedy. The men at the Lecombe training camp were the top terrorists in the Cuban community. An American adventurer and the CIA agent Gary Patrick Hemming admitted 20 years later. The movie was shocking to me because it demonstrated the notion that the CIA was training in America, a separate army. Tannenbaum later said, it was shocking because I'm a true believer in the system of yet there are notorious characters in the system who are being funded by the system who are absolutely un-American. And who knows what they would do eventually. What we are send people to Washington who they can't steal with, but out comes the secret army. When something else happened, can you guess? No, the film didn't get lost. It was stolen. After the discovery of the film, as important as the Zapruder film, this 8mm home movie taken in the summer of '63 vanished. According to James Files, this was the first real reason for Watergate. Watergate 2, the stealing of the training film, was to protest the reputation and political future of George H.W. Bush. Allegedly, a copy of the training film was in Barry Seal's white Cadillac the night he was gunned down in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, February 22nd, '86. Special federal agents swooped in and confiscated the contents of SEAL's trunk. The film went missing again. While in custody, the House Select Committee on Assassinations, the House of Representatives of the United States of America, it was stolen and never recovered. Who was the power to pull a black bag job on our nation's capital as one of the three co-equal branches of the United States government? Probably not the Ghostbusters. Daniel Hopsicker, Barry and the Boys, the CIA, the Mob, and the Americans, Secret History, page 51 through 55. We're going to leave it here and say thank you to all my listeners and subscribers. I do appreciate you very much. If you think I have any truth that I'm speaking here at all, please like and subscribe and share. Thank you very much.